Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. My wife and I have a small retirement account that I have given to a financial company to invest and grow. They are a fiduciary, which means that they have to act with my best as a priority. And when I gave them my money, my expectations were that they would watch over and invest my money like I would if I knew as much as they do about investing. But I'm not expecting that they will take off with half of it and go take a trip to the Bahamas on my dime or something. In Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, the Bible gives us the parable of the talents. And for a long story short, let me just read a couple verses here. It says in verse 14, "For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property." Verse 15 says, "To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. And then he went away." And of course, we know that when he got back, the first 2 servants had invested the money and that was entrusted to them wisely. But the last servant just dug a hole and did nothing with it. And this is what the master calls this servant when he finds out about this. He says, "You wicked and slothful or lazy servant." He even gives an exclamation mark there. He had not done what he should have with the money entrusted to him. What we are seeing coming out of the democratically run states is, well, wicked, to say the least. Taxpayer money is being given to them to obtain certain services and infrastructure and things like that. What government needs to run as a government, right? And we trust that they will use it wisely and spend it as if it was their own money. But that is not what we are getting from these wicked leaders. Everyone knows what is happening with Tim Walz in Minnesota and other places like that. But look at what's coming out of California right now. From an article from Christopher Rufo and Kenneth Shroop, they say California Governor Gavin Newsom is embroiled in a national fraud scandal. Thus far, much of the coverage has focused on alleged schemes related to unemployment insurance, hospice care, and food stamps. In this exclusive investigation through the Daily Wire, they say that we shine a light on one of California's largest initiatives, the In-Home Supportive Services Program, or IHSS, which pays family members and other individuals to provide home-based care for elderly and disabled people at a cost of nearly $30 billion per year. This is just California. Now, on the surface, IHSS presents itself as an instrument of compassion, directing billions to caregivers who help with cooking and personal care, laundry, and other daily needs inside the recipients' homes. That seems like a great program, right? But a growing number of experts and critics argue that the program is just rife with fraud, losing roughly an estimated $6 billion, maybe as much as $12 billion yearly to scammers. Meantime, the state's powerful home care unions collect more than $149 million in membership dues, funneling money into political network supporting Newsom, shocker, and other California Democrats. This is a story of a government that has allowed compassion to become a mask for fraud, creating a self-reinforcing system that keeps the Democratic establishment in power. Now, in 1973, California created what became the the IHSS program to provide in-home care to the elderly and disabled. Now, the IHSS, I don't know why it's so hard for me to say, the, the IHSS caseload exploded in the 1980s, prompting the state to impose hour caps on care providers. California offers the program through Medi-Cal, its version of Medicaid, and pays providers with a combination of federal, state, and county funds. IHSS has long been considered a magnet for fraud. In 2009, going all the way back to 2009, then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, remember him? Well, he estimated that up to 25% of IHSS claims were fraudulent. That's all the way back then. 25%. A Sacramento grand jury report that year found that providers had no meaningful oversight. And let me repeat that again. There was no meaningful oversight, no assessment of skills to meet client needs, no monitoring of the validity of service hours, and no background checks. After growth of the program's roles exploded in the early 2000s, Schwarzenegger signed legislation aimed at curbing abuse, requiring IHSS providers to undergo criminal background checks and introducing random claim reviews. So, yeah, just like randomly, you might get checked. Sounds like a good plan to me. But soon after the law's passage, it didn't seem like a good plan to Democrats. A state work group teaming with representatives from labor organizations introduced a key loophole, citing concerns about disruptions. Yeah, disruptions for the vulnerable members of the IHSS community. The task force barred regulators from conducting fully randomized, unannounced home visits, leaving the program more exposed to scammers, of course. I mean, why else would you do that, right? Since then, the program has expanded dramatically again. IHSS provider has become the largest low-wage occupation statewide, with more than, get this, 800,000 taxpayer-funded caregivers, offering everything from grocery shopping to personal care. 800,000. Applying for IHSS care is straightforward. First, a prospective beneficiary files a California Department of Social Services application. Second, a county social worker visits his home to determine his need for care. And third, the county or public authority reviews the application, and if it approves, designates the applicant as a beneficiary, who can then use taxpayer funds to hire the caregiver of his choice, and in more than 70% of cases, a direct family member. Now, the service operates largely on trust, which is always a great idea when it comes to government plans, right? Providers self-report their time cards and check-in records. In roughly 60% of cases, providers and beneficiaries live together, delivering care in private homes, typically without the threat of random or unannounced visits, of course. County-level fraud controls appear to be lacking. State regulations prevent IHSS staff from making unannounced visits unless a whistleblower files a specific complaint or regulators identify clear red flags. Even when complaints are lodged, though, investigations apparently can be slow, and prosecutions slower still. According to the state's Department of Social Services, for one 12-month period between 2023 and 2024, counties received nearly 7,000 fraud complaints. These are just complaints in that 1 year period of time, 7,000 fraud complaints. 28 counties recorded 964 fraud investigations of that 7,000. So less than 1,000 of the 7,000 were even investigated. And those 964 fraud investigations resulted in only 39 cases prosecuted. Out of 7,000 fraud complaints, 39 cases prosecuted. County-level regulators face additional problems. A 2021 Riverside County audit claimed that the local IHSS program did not adhere to review and approval procedures for program integrity referrals. In addition, more than 60%, almost 2/3 of the county staff at the Department of Public Social Services, which, according to the auditor, handles program oversight, these 60% were IHSS providers themselves, meaning that they had an interest in maintaining the status quo. It's like the wolf guarding the hen house. California, in other words, is sending billions of dollars per year to a program that is easy to exploit and difficult to administer and almost impossible to supervise. Now, in 2024, the federal government began a series of enforcement actions as part of a nationwide crackdown on healthcare-related crimes. The United States Department of Justice announced prosecutions for alleged IHSS fraud in California. And in one case, the DOJ alleged that San Dimas resident, and his last name is Barbarino, billed the state for more than $170,000 in fraudulent IHSS and Medi-Cal services over a 5-year period. The patient in his care was reportedly hospitalized or living in a facility at the time and thus ineligible for IHSS reimbursement. In another case, Joseph DePazia allegedly billed the state for more than $50,000 in fraudulent IHSS services, according to prosecutors. He kept submitting claims after the patient entered the hospital and even after she died. He just kept, saying, "Hey, where's my money?" Last year, federal officials announced another round of IHSS fraud prosecutions. In one case, prosecutors alleged that Miriam Arabakish falsely claimed payments for caring for her patients while they were outside the United States, even. In another, Cindy Lynn Fromm allegedly billed the program for more than a year of services while the recipient was incarcerated. These cases may be the tip of the iceberg. Haywood Talcove, he's the CEO of LexisNexis Risk Solutions for Government and a nationally recognized fraud expert. He estimates that annual IHSS fraud could amount to 20% to maybe as high as 40% of total program spending. Of all the money it gets, billions of dollars, up to 40% could be just simply going to fraud. Applied to projected IHSS outlays for fiscal year 2025-2026, that suggests roughly somewhere between $6 billion to $12 billion in losses. Multiple senior officials at the Department of Health and Human Services have described a similar pattern, estimating that about 25% of the Medi-Cal budget is lost to fraud. A quarter of the whole budget is what they're even saying is, yeah, well, we know that. The share is likely higher for IHSS given the program structure and its, of course, how it's susceptible to abuse. Earlier this year, Mahep Oz, he's the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And he set off a firestorm of controversy with the claim that criminal networks, including the Russian Armenian mafia, were running massive hospice and home care scams in Los Angeles. He suggested that Armenians in Los Angeles were disproportionately represented among the leaders of hospice fraud rings. One red flag for social service fraud, Talcove suggested, is high community usage rates. And Armenian speakers in Los Angeles do appear to be significantly overrepresented among the county's IHSS providers and recipients. Armenian speakers represent, get this, 14.6% of the IHSS recipients and 6.5% of their caregivers. And this is per state data, okay? People who speak Armenian fluently and English less than very well, however, make up 0.8% of LA County's population, according to census data. So you're talking about almost 15% of the people are collecting, and the population is 0.8% of the population. Yeah, assuming that these Armenian speakers are identical to self-report, Armenian speakers in the IHSS data, Armenian speakers who speak English less than very well are 18 times more likely to be IHSS recipients and 8 times likelier to be IHSS caregivers than their share of the county population would suggest. So these high utilization rates do not, on their own, prove fraud. Okay, we want to be clear here. But analysis such as Talcove argues that the organized criminal groups are taking advantage of the program at scale, using just a conservative 25% fraud estimate, which is what they basically already admit to. Within Talcove's range of consistent, it's consistent with HHS officials and broader Medi-Cal assessments. Scammers may have siphoned at least $35 billion from IHSS during Gavin Newsom's administration. That's just conservative. $35 billion have been siphoned off, not going to where they need it, not going to who needs that, going to scammers. Quote, there's virtually no incentive for them to stop, Talcove said. California has limited to no controls in place here. So there's nothing stopping them. It's just like, here, back the truck up and, shovel in the dollars. Perhaps the biggest beneficiaries of California's IHSS program are labor unions, which have enrolled more than 600,000 IHSS providers. 2 leading unions for the state's in-home care workforce, the SEIU Local 2015 and United Domestic Workers, the UDUW, collectively racked in more than $149 million in dues just 2024 alone. Both have direct stake in the program's expansion, of course, since every new IHSS worker is a potential dues-paying member. These unions are some of the most powerful institutions in California politics and collectively send millions of dollars to the state's Democratic establishment. SEIU, Local 2015, contributed $2 million to Newsom's anti-recall campaign. They spent another $2 million in favor of Proposition 50, which was a measure to redraw the state's congressional districts in favor of Democrats, and donated over $90,000 to Newsom across his 2 campaign years. UDW donated $20,000 to Newsom's 2022 re-election campaign. Both unions have contributed heavily to Democrats, not just Newsom. So SEIU, Local 2015, and United Domestic Workers of America have also allegedly used coercive tactics to expand their membership. Nathan Vu, he's a caregiver in San Diego, and he says that UDW pressured him to join during his IHSS orientation back in February of 2024. Though he says he declined, the union allegedly began deducting dues from his paycheck anyway. Very convenient of them, right? Vu said, I specifically said no. Vu says he told UDW to stop deducting dues and demanded that they provide a copy of his membership agreement and proof of authorization. The UDW, he claims, provided neither. and kept deducting dues for a full year anyway before terminating his membership. SEIU 2015, which claims to represent thousands of long-term care workers, has allegedly one-upped UDW. According to one former member, the group locked IHSS workers into a room and coerced at least one to become a member. A sworn statement filed as part of a lawsuit against the union has Chaquan May, and she alleges that in September of 2023, the union coerced her into signing up for a membership at the IHSS orientation. May claimed that the union employees locked the doors and told her and the other new IHSS providers, quote, "We're waiting for everyone to sign. No one is leaving until everyone signs," unquote. May claimed to have signed under duress, and on September 3rd of 2024, she alleged that the union began deducting dues. She claimed to have sent a certified mail opt-out letter the following day, which the union allegedly ignored. SEIU Local 2015 allegedly continued deducting dues from her paycheck until at least April of last year. Unfortunately for May and other allegedly mistreated IHSS workers, these disputes between public employees and their unions are handled by the California Public Employment Relations Board. Yeah, each of the board's 5 members, you got it, is appointed by the governor, and 3 of the current members have former union ties. Quote, "The Public Employee Relations Board is run by former union officials," said Sheila Arcabes. Sheila's a lawyer representing May and other plaintiffs. She said, "You think I'm going to get a fair hearing there?" Yeah, absolutely not. The system itself seems designed to prevent accountability. Governor Newsom is responsible for all the main components of the IHSS operation. He oversees the program, the enforcement, and efficiency, and the Public Employment Relations Board. So he has no incentive to crack down on a program that is enriching his most powerful allies. And according to the co-author Schrups, in his reporting, is responsible for more than 40% of the net jobs created during his administration. And so the system expands, right? Despite making some initial noise about reforming the program last year for his upcoming budget season, Governor Newsom has sought to increase the IHSS funding by an additional $1.1 billion to a total, get this, of $33.4 billion, boasting that his administration has invested billions of state taxpayer dollars into the program. Given these political realities, the only plausible check on IHSS may come from Washington. Yeah, the Trump administration could, condition federal funding on rigorous audits and structural reforms and things like this, right, to hold them accountable. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could require California to mandate re-registration of all caregivers and recipients using third-party identification verification and expand random unannounced visits and all of those things that would hold them accountable. But absent such interventions, the corruption in California is unlikely to abate. It will take a countervailing authority willing to confront not only fraudsters, but also the political system that sustains them to force meaningful change. That's what has to be done. And I'll say, liberal leftists don't want the change. They don't want the change. It's benefiting. It definitely benefits them. They let the fraudsters go, and the unions collect their dues that everybody gives to the campaigns of these corrupt politicians. And this system just keeps growing, and the corrupt politicians just keep giving out more money. I mean, Newsom's asking for another $1.1 billion to a system that is at least giving up 25% of the dollars to fraud, at least, and probably more than that. But, they are not capitalists that believe in working hard to earn their money. They believe in socialism that says that everyone should be given equal amounts of everything. Well, except the leaders, of course, they get more. and that brings us to this opinion piece by Chloe Trapanotto. And she starts out by saying this. She says, Dinesh D'Souza posted a chilling rhetorical question in his 2020 book, United States of Socialism. Think how insane it would be if someone said, let's try slavery again. Slavery didn't work in the past because we didn't have the right people to implement it. But this time we're going to have the right people, and this time we're going to get it right. Yet, this is exactly what the socialists say about socialism. He is still correct 6 years later. Democrats and their fellow travelers, however, seem to have doubled down on this backward thinking and are proceeding full steam ahead into socialist waters. The ultra-progressive Democratic Socialists of America, that's the DSA, they released a new poll. Their first formal poll, in fact, a telling sign of their extending tentacles into the mainstream, showing that 53% of Democratic voters prefer politicians described as similar to Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative AOC and New York City Mayor Zoran Mandami, while only 33% favored those similar to Senator Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Representative Nancy Pelosi. These numbers aren't an anomaly. They are a trend. Since 2016, rank-and-file Democrats have grown increasingly hostile toward the system that built this country. According to recent Gallup data, the gap has expanded to a staggering 24 points, with 66% of Democrats viewing socialism favorably compared to just 42% for capitalism. What exactly do these voters find agreeable about the ultra-left socialist wing of their party? For starters, the lofty ideals that big government should be in control, that billionaires are evil, that corporations and high-income earners should be taxed into oblivion, that Congress should enact more regulations on workers and customers, and that housing, healthcare, and utilities should fall under the purview of the public sector. To conservatives, most independents, and even some Democrats still, these goals portend only bureaucratic bloat, delays, and stifling of innovation. Most proponents of capitalism believe the private sector is best equipped to improve American lives. They generally support lower taxes, oppose government regulation of businesses, and want the private sector to own key industries like housing and healthcare and utilities and things like that, as confirmed by the DSA's own poll. A staggering 74% of likely Democratic voters said democratic socialism comes closest to their viewpoint. That means America will be seeing a rise in the Bernie Sanders, the Mamdani, the AOC type, with it a severe stifling of growth and innovation, a rapid spike in taxation, and the influx of leftist agenda items into the mainstream. Bernie Sanders, the unproductive socialist senator from Vermont, and a man who has added precious little of significance to his state or his country in his decades in office, is now using the socialist wave to push his latest agenda item, a federal memorandum on the construction of new AI data centers. Yeah, with the collectivist compassion AOC in tow. This moratorium, like so many of the policies this pair champion, would erect burdensome bureaucratic roadblocks that frustrate innovation and squander entrepreneurialism. In Bernie's world, we should fear millionaires. No, wait. We should fear billionaires because he's now a millionaire himself. We should fear technology and climate change at all times. And better yet, just stay in your home until further notice. This new wave of socialism will also bring suffocating taxes and a collectivist mindset because, as Comrade Mamdani proclaimed, the blanket of collectivism is so warm and cozy. Bernie and his, proletariat wouldn't just tax the billionaire class. They would enact wealth taxes across the board. Taxing unrealized gains or net wealth forces billionaires to sell their stocks, which can crash market prices and reduce the capital available for businesses to expand and hire and things like that. IRS data shows that the top 1%, get this, the top 1% already pay roughly 40% of all federal income taxes. The Democratic Socialists want you to believe that poor people pay all the taxes and the wealthy get off scot-free. They have it completely backwards. They would simply like to take $10 billion from a technology company or its founder and pour it into a government black hole of bureaucracy where Sanders and his friends reside. Leave that money with the founders, the entrepreneurs, and the innovators, and it goes into rockets and electric cars and global internet access. As Margaret Thatcher wisely noted, and actually even Elon Musk echoed, eventually they run out of other people's money, and then they come for you. The final and perhaps most alarming aspect of this modern socialist resurgence is the Trojan horse delivery system. Under the banner of DSA, we see a conglomerate of radicalism where traditional Marxists, climate extremists, and anti-Western agitators coalesce into a single political force. By quietly installing hundreds of activists into local school boards, city councils, and state legislatures, they are executing a long march through the institutions. It isn't just a policy shift. It's a calculated, multi-level erosion of the capitalist fabric our founding fathers, painstakingly cultivated. Apparently, they don't anticipate the Watermelon Coalition growing so rapidly. That's its mission, to dismantle the American capitalist empire from within the belly of the beast, would find willing participants at every level of government. The good news is that Democrats have tried their socialist playbook before, and while it performs reasonably well at the local level, the national stage has been another story entirely. In 2024, that made it clear. But that isn't stopping them. What the mainstream of the party wants is both democratic socialism as a value system and democratic socialist politicians. And this is what Gabe Tobias said. He's the executive director of the Democratic Socialists of America Fund to Politico. Democratic socialism is a pretty way of blending class-based Marxism with modern identity politics. It is no longer just about the proletariat. It's about mobilizing a coalition of the oppressed to overthrow the oppressor and pave the way for state-sponsored redistribution. It won't work. It never does. But it looks like the American left is going to have to find that out the hard way. And I really do believe that this is the case. We see fraud, we see corruption, we see Marxism coming out of the leftist Liberal Democratic Party. And I would love to hear if you think the same way. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.